So let's jump yet again into another Transformers Slag Patreon listener question. If you are interested in joining the Transformers Slag Patreon, come join the crew and get some cool bonuses, such as having your name in all the podcast segments at the end in the scroll credits, as well as the segment descriptions after your registration. Special Discord access in the special Discord, which gives you amazing bonus content, perks, rare Transformer media merchandise, and content from the Proto Man archive of all the crazy stuff I got there. Merchandise gift in the mails after a certain tier point, and of course, the Patreon listener question. And we're going to jump into one today with longtime patron Jason M, and he wants to know, "Hey Proto, hope all is well. My question is, as we all know, Peter Cullen and Frank Welker won't be with us forever. We have seen others take up the mantle of their beloved characters, but in my humble opinion, they were just not as good. So what do you think Hasbro will do in the future when these icons leave us? I know it's not a fun question to ask, but I think it needs to be asked so people will know about the gold standard of Transformers media. Thanks again and stay safe, Jason M." I feel like we've kind of had a little taste of that in the past. Like, to really look back at it, because when you think about Peter Cullen and Frank Welker, the original voices of G1 Optimus Prime and Megatron, and of course Galvatron in some small little pieces here and there. You look back at 1984, 1985, 1986, and a little bit of 1987, especially with commercials, and that's really the initial span that those two guys took care of their characters. And then after about 1987, again, like I said, with the exception of small little commercials and that, those two really had nothing to do with those characters for years. Ninja Turtle toy era came around in 87, 88, Power Ranger era. The world was looking in a different place, and we kind of moved on. Generation 2 came and went. It brought back those voices, but they weren't working at that point. They were just, those were reruns in Generation 2, if anything. And then I think we truly moved on when we entered the 10-year-long span that was Gary Chalk and David Kaye. Starting with 95, 96, we had Beast Wars. We were introduced to a new Optimus, an Optimus Primal, and a new Megatron, a Beast Megatron, in Gary Chalk and David Kaye. And those guys would carry the load for 5 years in the Beast era, Beast Wars, and in Beast Machines. We had a little stopgap for 6 months with Robots in the Skies, and then those two were back at it again for another 5 years with the Unicron trilogy. So for a near 10 years, after only a small 4 years of of Peter Cullen and Frank Welker, we had a near 10 years of Gary Chalk and David Kaye. And those guys, during that period, both of them playing Optimuses, Optimus Primes, and Megatrons. And we kind of moved on from there. And it wasn't really until the 2007 movie and the big groundswell that came from the fandom was the push to bring Peter back into the mantle of Optimus Prime. And of course, the success of that movie led to him continuing the role across all the other platforms, not just the movie. Video game voice acting for Optimus Prime. Toy voice clips for Optimus Prime, which up to that point, even toys of Optimus Prime didn't have Peter Cullen's voice in it. All kinds of different television media, whether it be the Transformer Prime TV series and other stuff moving forward, supplemental material. Peter all of a sudden got back into the role of Optimus Prime. Now, Frank was a little late to the game. He didn't get in initially in 2007, but he did afterwards when Hugo Weaving kind of let go of the role. And Frank returned, initially as Galvatron, but then returned as Megatron to voice Megatron from that point on. And then, same thing, Transformers Prime TV series, we got back Frank too, and Frank has more or less been our Megatron across a lot of different media. That being said, though, I feel that while they are two very good characters, and they're very good at depicting those roles. I love Frank Welker's Generation 1 Megatron. I thought he had some of the best line delivery in Season 1 and Season 2 when he played that character. Like, it would just be some of the best stuff between him and Starscream, especially. If you want to forgive me, Starscream, I'll relegate you to the ranks of underling. Like, so much really good stuff. Really, really good stuff. It's not to take away from Peter Cullen, a fellow Montrealer over here. Peter was born in Montreal, Canada, but Frank was an incredible G1 Megatron, and Peter was just as good, if not greater, depending on who you ask. But at the same time, I felt like at some point we did move on. We really did when Gary and David Kay came around. And they kind of continued the legacy that those two started all those years ago. And especially when you then even move even more forward, where the fact that David Kay would go on to even voice an Optimus Prime as well as a Megatron, in him being Optimus Prime and Transformers Prime, and how much people love that Optimus and how much people love animated. So in a lot of ways, for people who love animated, their Optimus Prime is a David Kay. And if you're a Beast Wars fan, Gary Chalk voiced that small little cameo for G1 Megatron in, I think it was the Agenda Part 2, it was, in Season 2. So it's funny how even those two, not only did they each do an Optimus and a Megatron, but they even did a Megatron and an Optimus. So they're very two talented individuals, and I felt that they were two people that I really felt continued the legacy. And of course, even in the between that, we got Neil Kaplan, who played Optimus Prime in Robots in Disguise, and Dan Riodan, I think his name was. Dan Riodan, who was Megatron and Galvatron in that. Gigatron, if you want to call it. But at the same time, like, I feel we'll be able to move on. I think that while those guys did incredible jobs in the past, we had a taste of living in an era without those voice actors. And we were very happy. Beast Wars was one of the greatest times to be a Transformer fan. For others who grew up with Unicron Trilogy, they loved their Unicron Trilogy. And look who was voicing the two leaders during that time. It's kind of like being a Starscream fan. You might love Chris Latta and everything that he did with G1 Starscream and Cobra Commander. But when you enter the Armada and the Unicron Trilogy, specifically Armada, because that's where he got the most character development, Michael Dobson did a smash-up job, and Michael Dobson, ironically enough, was so good at Starscream, he ended up doing Cobra Commander, too, for a lot of animated stuff. But if you're a big animated fan, Transformers Animated, Tom Kenny was a great Starscream. So there was another interpret. And then if you're a big Transformers Prime fan, Steve Blum, there's a lot of people that love that Starscream. So we've had a lot of different opportunities to get used to different voice actors taking up the mantles of very important characters in Transformers lore. And while we love Peter, we love Frank, they're both two incredible individuals. I got to meet Frank only once in my life, but we had a good time, a lot of joking around, and made fun of my, at the time I had a pink phone. And Peter I've met multiple times throughout the years, through all the different BotCons and everything. So, we have that little Montreal thing going on. French-Canadian connection. But the point is that, getting to meet those two and stuff, they're both incredible individuals, really cool guys. They love their fans. And they know that their fans love them. And that when the time comes that they'll have to pass it on to the next person, I'm pretty confident, just seeing how we got that beautiful stint of 10 years with David and Gary, that who knows, we might be just fine. I think we'll be good. And I've always said it many times, Gary Chalk, extremely talented voice actor. David Kay, probably along with Scott McNeil, probably one of the best voice actors of all time. Him and Scotty are probably two of the most talented voice actors ever in terms of just character development, in terms of the ability to line read with their fellow compatriots, character delivery, line delivery. Just I can't even get into how much I love David Kay and Scott McNeil, but those are guys that they showed that they could take the stick and they could run with it, so to speak. Take the ball and run with it, probably the better way to say it. But yeah, that's what Transformers. You know what I mean? There's always a next step, a next evolution, a next, Cyberverse was a great series. Great series. Little short, but that's always been my criticism of it. But it's a great series, and all of those voice actors were not veterans to those characters that they were depicting, whether it be Hot Rod or Optimus Prime or Megatron or Bumblebee, and they all did very good jobs. So, if you give people an opportunity, to really sink into a character and get to know them, they start to get really good at it. Gary and David were very lucky to have Megatron and Optimus as characters all those years to really develop them and find their place with them. And it's kind of the same thing where the voice actor for Hot Rod in Cyberverse, as the series progressed, he really, really fell into his own with that character and started to develop it really well. So I'm hoping that whoever gets the mantle of Optimus and Megatron next really respects it and makes a good effort to do a good job, and we'll be fine. We'll miss Peter and Frank when that day comes, as much as we don't want to think about it, but I think we'll be fine, and we got a little taste of that back in the 90s and the early 2000s, and I think we'll get a taste of it again in the future, and hopefully, much like the Beast Wars and the Unicron trilogy, it will be successful, and we'll be fine in a good era. But I hope that answers your question, Jason M. I'm curious what other people think. I'm curious, do you think, we would be able to replace them? Would there be someone that could come around and still do a good Optimus Prime or a good Megatron? Or do you think they'll just be nothing like those two? That those two are just the gold standard and everything else that'll come afterwards is nothing but a pretender? No pun intended in Transformers. But yeah, it would just be a pretender. It's funny, actually. There was an Optimus and a Megatron pretender. Anyways, but yeah, let me know what you think. Great stuff. Once again, if you want to be a part of the Transformer Slag Patreon, just like Jason M. over here, ask a question on the podcast, or you just want to let us know that we're doing a good job, check the description below, check the comments, patreon.com/Protoman. Check us out. Let us know what you think, and give us your opinion.